In today's stream, I'm gonna try to do a quick introduction in how to TA in Fate Grand Order. So what does this actually mean? The term TA comes from racing games or whatever games many years in the past, meaning time attack, or in turn-based games like Fate Grand Order, turn attack. And it means that you're doing whatever challenge quests, difficult story quests in Fate Grand Order in the minimum amount of turns, basically. That's the gist of it. So why would you want to do it? I don't know. Some people find it fun. Specifically, it can be fun to see how far you can push the limits of the servants that you have and the servants that you specifically like, for example. And that already brings us to two approaches to how to TA, basically. So one approach, because many of the challenge quests that the game gives us, or the story quests that the game gives us, are not all that difficult. Some people choose to do their TAs by handicap or approach their TAs by handicap, meaning that they'll say, oh, this challenge quest I'll do with only a 3-star servant as my main DPS, or this challenge quest I will do without a craft essence equipped on my DPS. This requires a pretty deep knowledge of the entire servant roster and how they apply to certain quests and what they do well, how you can put them together to cheat out some extra damage or whatever. And this is definitely not recommended to beginners to go by handicap. It is a way to more or less find unique TAs that nobody's done before or very few people have done before, but again, it requires a very deep knowledge and understanding of the game, so the barrier of entry is very high. Then the second approach is basically you just take a servant that you think can do it or should be able to do it and that you like and try to see, okay, can I make this work? Can I do this in the minimum amount of turns possible? Can I, with my servant roster, do this? The second approach I think is a bit better for beginners or people who have never tried TAing because it helps you, or it lets you use your favorite servants, and it's a lot easier to sit through some of the more time intensive and annoying things of the TAing part, I guess, because you're getting to play around with a servant that you find fun, or yeah, have fun using, more or less. So let's go with the second approach. How do we actually think about this? I'm going to do this on the example of the Saber Altar Memorial quest that's currently up. This quest is a very high difficulty level compared to other TAs, and I already more or less pre-figured out an example so that it doesn't take minutes or hours even to actually figure out, oh, is this possible with a servant? Yeah, doing that live would have been a bad idea, I think. So basically, what you do is you figure out the details of the enemy that you're facing in the quest, like, or for example, for certain scripted actions that they do when you break their break bars, etc. And for this quest, it's pretty straightforward. It is a Saber class enemy, man attribute, female, weak to Inuma Elish, dragon trait, Saber face trait, Arthur trait. So those are all like small details about the enemy that you're facing that certain servants can take advantage of. Furthermore, there's two quirks specifically to this one, where on a break bar, the Saber Altar here will always give yourself defense down buff, a debuff. And on the first one, she will cast Charisma right after. On the second one, she will cast Mana Burst right after. And another quirk of this Saber Altar is that she's permanently taunted to casters, which means that unless you have a taunting craft essence or a taunting skill in play, she will always prioritize caster class servants on your side over non-caster class servants. This can, yeah, these quirks are basically how you go about building your team then, because you can maybe abuse some of these things. For example, what I just mentioned, the taunt to casters helps you suicide a caster maybe to get a free swap in for another one. So when you've figured out, okay, so I'm gonna use this servant as my DPS because I just grailed them or whatever, then what you should do is remind yourself, okay, this servant has this type of Noble Phantasm, has this card deck. To maximize the damage, I would want to use servant X, Y, Z, etc. So which servants actually work well with them. You can do that simply by going into the party screen and just, okay, which buffers do I usually use when I want to do something fun with this servant, and then figure it out. Okay, these buffs I can have active on turn 1, these buffs I can have active on turn 2 if I manage to make this altar kill one of my servants for a free swap in. This is what I can get on turn 3 if she kills somebody again on turn 2, so I get another free swap in. And this is how you basically get to, in your head, get an idea for a script. Script meaning, okay, I'm gonna use this, and this turn 1, this, and this turn 2, etc. And with those ideas of, okay, this amount of buffs is what I have turn 1, turn 2, turn 3, you can start thinking about, okay, I have these buffs, but is this actually enough to break the bar on that turn to be able to use the minimum amount of turns necessary? So to actually calculate and figure out, is this gonna be enough, or is this gonna work? Is the servant gonna refund enough Noble Phantasm Gorge, for example? You can use many tools. You can use a normal calculator. The formula for all those calculations are freely available out there. You can use a spreadsheet. I think there's several spreadsheets that have been linked here or there to calculate the damage of an entire turn, for example, not just single cards. Or what I most of the time do and also recommend is using a certain Discord bot. It's called the Wizard or Caster Gilgamesh bot. And I'm gonna quickly make this visible. So learning how to use this bot is probably one of the things that will help you level up how you're approaching challenge quests or difficult quests a lot, or the most even, because it's a very quick way to gauge, oh, okay, I might need an extra buffer here, or oh, okay, I may have chosen the wrong servant for this. These damage levels that I need to hit are not realistic for this. So let's give a short intro how to use this bot. It has a pretty good help command already. And basically what it tells you is you do tests, and in this case we're using Atalanta. You can use the numeric ID of the servant or nicknames. You can check what the nicknames are with exclamation point get names, but yeah, doesn't matter for now. Most of the servants just have their regular name set as one of the nicknames in this bot anyways. Then you enter certain things that you've set. Like in this example, I'm going to use the stats for level 100 Black Grail. So it has CE 2400, which is here, sets the attack from CE, default 0, but Black Grail at level 100 has 2400, and NP mod N of 80 for MLB Black Grail. And this is how you then can enter all the kinds of buffs or craft essences that your servant has. And so let's actually look at where we are in the game right now in the top right. We're on turn 1. I already did some of the annoying resetting part or trying to get the RNG to hit just right, which I'll explain later what I mean with that. So what are we looking at? I've already swapped a second Skadi to the back after using all her buffs. So we have card mod, or short M of 50 from the first Skadi. We have def minus 30 from the first Skadi. Then we can see we have a second Skadi with all her buffs used. So we have another M50, def minus 30. And then we have a Tamamo Lancer. This Tamamo Lancer's skills are not level 10. So the values are A18 for the Charisma, the first skill. And for the second skill, also level 9, it is def minus 28. And these are all the kinds of buffs that you can see here in the first few lines. Yeah, so that should be all the active buffs for the Noble Phantasm. And I said before that our target was a saber with man attribute. And if we then hit enter with this test, it will give us a damage range in which the Noble Phantasm should hit. So to demonstrate this, just try it out. Select the Noble Phantasm and 2 cards, whatever. See what it does. Total 389k something, which is, as you can see, in the range it gives here. And yeah, this bot is coded to use the exact same damage formula as the game, so it will give you the correct damage values. There's a few other things that you can set, like for example, if this Atalanta was grailed, let's just copy the same string, but say she's grailed to level 100, you can put L100, and then you can see, oh, okay, level 100 Atalanta would do roughly 60k average damage more. And then you can also add gold foes if you've used that on her, etc. Now, it says here at the bottom, exclamation mark cards for a few more arguments that you can use to test regular cards, which is a very important part for the TAing stuff, because most of the time in challenge quests when you're TAing, the Noble Phantasm isn't all it takes. Like you need extra cards to, for example, refund enough, you need extra cards to actually do enough damage, etc., etc. So what we have on this turn, after I use the skill, should remember to do that, we can do an exclamation mark cards to see exactly how that works. So as you can guess, you can set the card type by simply adding the name of the card type. You can set BF for Buster first card bonus to calculate the damage with that. Then there's Buster Chain or BBB. You can set the position of the card, since that also affects the damage. And you can say crit to calculate what a crit would do. So as you can see, we have a 70% Buster and a 90% quick. So let's just hope we're lucky, or assume we're lucky, and calculate the damage for the Buster crit. So we're gonna do test Atalanta CE 2400. Now comes an important part. You do not put the N80 that we previously did for the NP mod from our Black Grail, because NP mod does not affect cards. However, because NP mod and Power mod are effectively the same thing to the game, they are also coded as the same variable in the wizard mod, which means whenever you're testing cards on a servant with Black Grail equipped, for example, you need to keep in mind that you need to take that out of the calculation and only put in the correct buffs. However, the crit buffs, for example, from Scuddy, are power mod, so they would be put in here. That's also why there's a crit icon here. So, okay, so from the craft essence, we only have the 2400 attack. What we did next was the first Scuddy buff. So card mod doesn't apply here because it's a Buster card. So we leave it out. Def minus 30. But and the crit mod on Scuddy's skill is also not does not work for Buster and Arts cards, so we have to leave that out as well. Second Scuddy, Tamamu Lancer, the target variables, Saberman, and now we can do the card variables. It is a Buster, first, BF, crit. So what does it say? It says it does 34k to 42k. Let's test that out. 51k. That is surprising. I must have missed something. See, even if you've used this bot quite a bit, you tend to run into things that you've done wrong. That is curious. Well, okay, so she is no, I do not currently know what exactly causes this. Yeah, this is very of course, because I typed in the wrong thing. It is def minus 28 for Tamamu Lancer. It did 51k, which is within this range. Sorry, that was a bit dumb, but you can see, like, you have to keep in mind and double check yourself on entering the buffs correctly. So even somebody who's used this bot for, I think, almost a year now can make silly mistakes like this. So let's test the quick card in second position as critting. As before, don't enter the NP mod from the Black Grail, but this time we enter the buffs from Scuddy, so it is M50 P100 because it's 100% crit mod, which works like power mod. Def minus 30, M50, P100, def minus 30, A18, def minus 28, Saber Man, quick second, BF crit. So we still have the Buster first bonus because we're gonna use her Buster card first in the chain. Gonna use the quick second. Bot says 166 to 203k, and we're gonna have to check that on the health bar of Salter, actually. We know that the Buster does about 51k, so Saber Alter would be at 597 after the Buster, and then after the quick, we need to check how much HP she is at. 415k. 415k from roughly 596k. Looks to me like roughly 181k. Yeah, 181k. So this is slightly below average, but again, within this range that it's displaying. And this is basically how it works, to how to calculate the damage with this bot. And since before I mentioned, okay, you have to first figure out what possible buffs could I give the servant on turn 1, turn 2, turn 3, turn 4, turn whatever along the quest. That's how you, or that's where you get all the stuff that you need to put in here, basically. And then figure out, okay, I'm going to need this card, this card, this card on turn 1 to make turn 1 work. I need one out of these 2 cards to make it work, etc., etc., etc. And you do this turn by turn, or you can also start at the last turn calculating there, because in some challenge quests, or in many challenge quests, the last turn is actually the most difficult one. So you would first optimize your team around, okay, can I actually hit that very difficult damage number on the last turn? Then can I do that while still having to ramp up in the turn before, while still having to ramp up in the turn before, and still break the bars on those turns? So yeah, depending on what quest you're going into and what servant you're going into it with, you figure it out turn by turn and see, okay, is this actually possible? Are the damage values that I need within the ranges that my servant can hit? And that's how you figure out, okay, is this TA realistic for me? So to go back to our example, the plan for the current turn is that we either need 2 quick cards or a Buster and a quick card from Atalante on turn 1. We need at least the quick card to be a crit, and we can break the first bar. So we're going to do that, and I'm going to either reset or not reset depending on what the Salter does, because we need something else to happen here as well. So let's see it play out. Okay, so what I was waiting for was seeing whether the Saber Alto would be able to kill my Tamamo Lancer, and she did not, which means that this turn basically failed. So I exit out of the game, have to change something about how I do the turn, and then I can try again. Okay, does she manage to kill the Tamamo Lancer again? I mentioned, or I touched on this very shortly before, where if you manage to make an enemy kill one of your servants, you basically get a free swap in. so you can use an extra buffer later down the road. So oftentimes you can just do this with servants that have a built-in taunt skill, for example. And other times you can use a craft essence that gives a taunt. And this is what I've done here. I've used the craft essence Outrage, which gives taunt for 1 turn. There's also the Poster Girl, Guda Poster Girl CE, that also gives target focus, and it gives target focus for 3 turns, but it has a higher party cost than Outrage. So that's why people usually use Outrage. The whole concept of suicide buffers also is the reason why some people that like to do TAs keep their servants below max level, or keep certain servants below max level, because it is easier for the enemy to kill those servants then. And yeah, I'm gonna just try to see if I can find a way for this Salter to kill my Tamamor Summer. Let's see, just to demonstrate it. Does not work. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. And so there's, as I mentioned, the taunting servants that are good candidates for this, because basically you can use the taunting servants with a craft essence that is very useful to what you're trying to do. Like, for example, putting Golden Catches the Carp on a taunting servant, and seeing, okay, can I crit enough on the turn that they get swapped in and manage to do whatever I want to do in their turn, and then they die off and another actual buffer gets swapped in. So let's see again, does she manage to kill Tamamor Lancer? But basically, if you don't need the effects of a specific craft essence, but rather need the effects of a specific servant, she managed, that is very good. The skills of a specific servant, then you would not want to use a taunting servant, because most of them don't have relevant group support skills, but rather use Outrage or Poster Girl to do this, or in this specific case, simply have a caster on the field, because she targets casters. So we've reached turn 2, and we have a card deck that is very good for the turn 2. Turn 2 should be possible with this card deck. I already know that this run is not going to be a successful one, because I had to use an extra skill on turn 1, but I think we can get through turn 2. And I can explain a bit more about why I've specifically used certain servants. So what servants would be a good use of a taunt craft essence? So one example would be generally just the servants that you use normally to buff, like Scuddy, like Waver, like Merlin, like whatever. However, most people don't have them at low level. One servant that I know I have at not max level, and also several others on my friend list don't have at max level because they are specifically useful as a buffer, is Chiron from the Apocrypha event. And I've kept him at level 60, which means that he has access to all his skills, and he's also rather low in HP, and easier to let the enemy kill off, basically. So we're gonna see what happens on turn 2 now, which is something that usually does not happen in this quest, but will explain why I've brought a rather curious support choice and had to reset RNG quite a bit before starting this, basically. Okay, damage is fine, as I prepared beforehand, more or less. Okay, does the break bar skill, does the mana burst, does the Noble Phantasm. But she has a 4-tick Noble Phantasm gauge, and this is turn 2. Why is she using her Noble Phantasm? That is why I chose to use Tamamo Lancer in this TA, because Tamamo Lancer gives the enemy 1 tick of their NP gauge. And specifically, Salter has high enough magic resistance that she can also resist the charm that Tamamo Lancer does. So what I basically did was, by using Tamamo Lancer, I had a Charisma and a Death down, and I also ensured that Salter can kill 2 of my servants on turn 2, allowing me 2 free swap-ins for the third turn. Now, as we see here, this card deck is completely useless, and I will not be able to finish the quest on this turn. But had I drawn 2 quick cards from Atalante again, which is possible because whenever a servant of yours gets killed, the entire deck gets reset, this would have been a clean 3-turn, for example. And yeah, there are servants like that which have very, very niche uses that make them uniquely useful in some challenge quests. This doesn't come up very often, like specifically the Tamamo Lancer one, but yeah, there's servants like that. Then so let's list a few good buffers here so that people also have a rough idea of who you could pair with your favorite servants, I guess. So there's the obvious no-brainers of using Scuddy for a quick DPS, using Merlin for Buster DPS, and using Tamamo for an Arts DPS. But then there's also Minamoto no Raiko Lancer for Buster DPS, which is the second strongest Buster support in the game. Yes, stronger than Nightingale in many cases, because she provides a Charisma and a Mana Burst over 3 turns. Her Mana Burst is weaker than Nightingale's, but the combination of attack buff and Mana Burst is what makes the servant outperform the Nightingale buffed version of themselves, basically. And yeah, so Minamoto Raiko for Buster, Shakespeare for Buster. Shakespeare is another good example of a suicide buffer. Technically, Shakespeare has his Buster buffing skill at level 1. So you could have a level 1 Shakespeare and only leveled his Buster skill to level 8 or 9 and have him swap in with a Tauntcraft Essence, use his Buster buff for that turn because you needed some extra buffs, and he gets swapped out after the turn anyways because he has no HP and doesn't survive. Then I've already touched on Nightingale. Nightingale is a very good support for Buster. Nightingale is also a berserker, which means that she can, in some situations, be pretty easy to suicide. However, the problem with Nightingale is that she has a very high base HP, and she also needs to be at 3rd Ascension to have access to her Buster skill. So it's not necessarily all that easy to suicide her, because some of the challenge quests tend to do very little damage. So let's go to Quick then, since we're using a quick servant right now. For quick, some of the other buffers are Atalante herself, since she has a 50% buster buff for the party, as well as a 15% quick buff for the party, as well as a 15% quick up on her Bond craft essence. The same is true for Skahak. And one buffer that many people are overlooking or maybe don't know about is Wu Zetian, the assassin from Agartha, who has, if you have a Bond essence, a total combined attack up and defense down of 40%. Like, I think it's 20% attack up, 20% defense down, as well as 20% quick up, as well as 20% quick up on her Bond essence, Bondcraft essence, which means that technically for pure damage, she is competitive with Skadi, if you're only talking about Noble Phantasm damage. She falls short quite a bit on the crit damage because she does not buff crits, obviously. But her power when it comes to buffing Noble Phantasms of Quick Servants is not to be underestimated. And she also does not have a very high HP stat, and she's also only a 4-star servant, which means you can keep her at a lower level and therefore lower HP level while still having access to all her skills. Then, say, if you want to suicide a Skadi. Like, if you want to suicide a Skadi, the lowest you can have her is level 70, and at level 70, Skadi still has a lot of HP compared to other servants. Then last for arts, who would be the MVP buffers that I would list. So for sure, Cars to Gilgamesh would be one of the most or strongest buffers for arts, since he brings 21% attack mod, 30% arts mod. I don't actually know what his Bondcraft essence does. Maybe it also buffs damage, potentially. Mozart is one that actually people often do know about, who has a 44% arts buff and a star bomb of 50 stars in one turn. And then since a few days ago, there is Paracelsus, who now has a 20% arts buff and a 50% targeted NP generation buff, which in some cases can greatly improve the refunding potential of servants. And Mozart also has a Bondcraft essence that improves NP damage by 20% while he's on the field. Though Mozart's Bondcraft essence is not the most common thing to see, because he's very often used to kickstart the first turn, basically. So he wears a Tauntcraft essence, uses his Star Bomb, uses his art skill if the refund from it, or if the arts buff is significant. Sometimes not even that. Sometimes he's purely used for the stars. And then he goes away. So you wouldn't get any mileage out of his Bondcraft essence, but his Bondcraft essence is very strong, don't get me wrong. Then, yeah. And then there's one MVP buffer for all card types that I also already mentioned, Chiron. I didn't say why he was being kept at a low level as a suicider, but the reason is basically he is applicable to every card type because he buffs all card types equally. It is 28 to 30, depending on if it's level 9 or level 10, card mod of all card types. He also drops stars, only 15, not 50 like Mozart, but he also buffs crit damage by 50%, which is a pretty high impact skill for 3 turns as well. So Chiron is a very popular servant to basically get in at the start and then suicide off, because again, you can keep him at a low level, easier to suicide, etc., etc. So with all this in mind, okay, let's go through this. So I'll go into the quest again and show what party I used and what the idea of it is, if I can find the person that I used the support of. Not right now. Yeah, as I said, the Saber Altar is a rather difficult challenge quest, so the requirements to TA it are pretty high, especially if you're doing it with a suboptimal servant, so to speak, since I used an AoE servant on a single target quest. But who cares about details like that if you like the servant, right? Okay, so I'll explain it with a different version basically. So this was the party I was using, except the Scuddy I was using was not wearing personal training, but instead was wearing this craft essence, the Wandering Tales of Shanao, which gives a buff specifically when the servant is defeated. And as you could see on turn 2, the Scuddy that I swapped in got killed by the Salter using her Noble Phantasm, which was in turn made possible because I used Tamama Lancer, which means on turn 3 this buff was active. And this is a way to cheat in, I guess, a bit more buffs, especially like if you can make a servant use their Noble Phantasm earlier than they're supposed to. It means you get double swap-ins or double deaths, so you could use 2 of these craft essences. Another very popular craft essence to put on servants that you let die would be Battle of Kamlan, which charges the NP gauge of the servant that's stayed alive. And this helps a lot in some of the Buster TAs, because Buster TAs usually have a bit more difficulty refunding their Noble Phantasms. So craft essences like these on Suiciders can be very, very helpful. But yeah, so we need to remove it to stay under the party cost. So basically, what I did is I reset until I have the correct cards for turn 1, which is either... No, actually, it has to be double quick cards from Atalanta, which is subject to a lot of RNG, as you can see. We need exactly 2 out of those cards. We also need both of them to crit, and we only have 20 crit stars available from Golden Catches the Cup on one of the frontline members. And once I have the 2 quick cards, I know, okay, I can try to get started. So what you then do is the second skill of Tamamo Lancer, and you have to reset the game until she misses the charm but hits the death down. So you can see where this goes. Like there's a lot of resetting the game for favorable RNG involved. And this is basically why I think you should go, if you want to try out TAs, with an approach where you say, okay, I want to use this servant. How can I make this servant do this quest in the minimum amount of turns? Because that way you're, I guess, invested in something you like or have fun using, rather than forcing yourself into a handicap and trying to beat the odds with a suboptimal choice, I guess. I mean, it can be very fun to play around with handicaps. I think specifically the handicap that you're not using a damage craft essence on your DPS can be very interesting. However, as I said, it can be very difficult in some challenge quests, and especially a quest like the Saber Altar memorial quest. It's difficult. Okay, can't find the support I had. So turn 1, reset until Tamamu Lancer hits her, misses her charm. Get her buffs, get Skadi buffs, swap Skadi for Skadi. Turn 1, use NP, the 2 quick cards, have Saber Altar kill Tamamu Lancer. Waver comes in, use Waver buffs, use the Noble Phantasm 2 quick cards. Saber Altar uses her Noble Phantasm, kills Waver and Skadi. Skadi's death triggers the Craft Essence buffs. Merlin comes in, use Merlin buffs, use Noble Phantasm 2 quick cards, or Buster Noble Phantasm quick card, and that's how you finish the 3 turn with this specific setup. And basically, when once you have all your entire script figured out, that's when you just go ahead and do it. And it will take you a lot of time the first few times you try it, unless you manage to find very low RNG setups. Like there are for easier challenge quests, there are certainly setups that don't require as much card RNG as this one, that don't require the enemy to kill off a certain servant with exactly 2 Buster cards that the enemy is using, etc. But yeah, you'll be in for a ride, and hopefully you'll have some fun along the way.